and play on 2nd and 10. That's his youth right there.
Tagovailoa trying to make up for it. Fires to the end zone. Touchdown! Alabama wins!
So today I'll be continuing with my 2026 college football game-by-game predictions and roster preview videos with the Louisville Cardinals. So Louisville only had the 48th ranked recruiting class in 2026, only getting 3 4-star commitments and 0 5-star commitments. So head coach Jeff Brohm is depending heavily on the portal. Louisville had the 2nd ranked transfer portal group, adding 34 players, and 5 of them were 4 stars. So starting on the offensive side of the ball, Louisville only averaged 25.4 points per game last year. I think their offense will be better this year. I think they'll average over 30 points per game this year. So at quarterback, Miller Moss is gone after only 1 season, and I thought he was a disappointment. So the new quarterback will be Lincoln Clonals, who has been Ohio State's backup quarterback for 2 years, and he's a 4-star recruit and a 4-star portal player. So he threw 36 passes and completed 21 of them, which is only 58.3%, and for 250 yards, which only averages 6.9 per throw, and he threw 1 touchdown pass. But he will give Jeff Brohm his first run threat as a quarterback. He had 68 rushing yards on 17 carries and 2 rushing touchdowns, averaging 4 yards per carry. And I do think he's an upgrade over Miller Moss because his first year was included in these numbers, and in his 2nd year with Ohio State, his numbers were a whole lot better, and he didn't throw an interception either year. So at wide receiver, they lose their top 2, Chris Bell and Calhoun Lacey, but they bring in a really good receiver from Vanderbilt, Trey Richardson, who had last season 46 catches for 806 yards and 7 touchdowns, averaging a really impressive 17.5 a catch. And they've got a very good tight end coming in from Tulsa, Brody Foley, who had in 11 games last year, 37 catches for 528 and averaged 14.3 yards per catch. And then at running back, at Louisville is elite. They're at least the best in the ACC, if not the best in the country, with both Isaac Brown and Keywan Brown coming back. So Isaac Brown last season had 884 yards and 7 touchdowns on 101 carries, averaging 8.8 yards per carry in 9 games because he was dealing with an injury. And then Keywan Brown had 704 yards and 6 touchdowns, averaging 7.3 a carry on 96 carries in 10 games because he was also dealing with an injury. If they both stay healthy, depending on how well the offensive line plays, Louisville could have 2,000-yard rushers this season. But their offensive line is going to take a step back, no doubt, because they only have 1 starter coming back. They're going to be starting 4 transfers. And they also lose their offensive line coach, who was really good. He went to Alabama. But the one starter that they do get back, at right guard Lance Robinson, is one of the best in the country. He only allowed 1 sack and 12 total pressures last season. So now on the defensive side, Louisville was very good here last year. They gave up only on average 16.5 points per game, and I think they'll average close to that good this year. So on the defensive line, they were very good, only giving up 114.3 rushing yards per game on average, which ranked 23rd in the country, except they only have one starter coming back. Now, that starter is one of the best in the country and probably the best defensive lineman in the ACC and one of the best pass rushers in all of college football, Clev Lubin, who had last season 61 tackles and 8.5 sacks and 5 pass breakups and 64 total quarterback pressures. And then at linebacker, they're going to be very strong because they've got everybody coming back. They've got TJ Capers, who had last year 46 tackles, a pass breakup, an interception, and 11 total quarterback pressures. And Antonio Watts, who had last year 42 tackles, 2 sacks, 3 pass breakups, 3 interceptions, and 12 total quarterback pressures. And Stanquan Clark, who only played in 5 games last year because of an injury, but in 2024 had 76 tackles, a half a sack, 2 pass breakups, 2 interceptions, and 2 forced fumbles. And then in the secondary, they were really good here last year too, giving up only 188.8 passing yards per game on average, which ranked 24th in the country. And they've got one of the best cornerbacks in the ACC coming back, Tayon Holloway, who had last season 42 tackles, 5 pass breakups, and 2 interceptions. But they'll be starting a transfer at the other cornerback spot. And then at safety, they lose both of their starters. So they'll be starting 2 transfers, except one of them is Cohen Intringer from Iowa, who's a really good safety, who had last year 73 tackles, 4 pass breakups, quarterback pressure, and a forced fumble. So now for the game-by-game predictions, starting with a Sunday night game on a neutral site against Ole Miss. So even though I'm high on Louisville's offense this year, Ole Miss, their defense, I think, is going to look more like that 2024 unit. I think they make Lincoln Clenoles get off to a slow start in this one and hold Louisville to no more than 24 points. I don't think, even though I'm high on Louisville's defense, that they can slow down Trinidad Chambliss and the passing attack of Ole Miss or Keywan Lacey and their rushing attack. So while I do think it'll be a competitive game, I think Ole Miss wins it by at least 10 points, probably 14 points. But then they get to recover from it by playing an FCS opponent at home on a Friday night called Villanova. They'll be able to play their backups the whole second half of that one and just name their scorer. So now they start conference play against a team that I'd say they're about even with coaching and the roster in SMU. So I'm going to say that Louisville gets this win because they're the home team by about a field goal in a game that probably goes down to the last play. So now Wake Forest. So while Wake Forest is not what you would consider to be a very talented team, less talented than Louisville is. At this point of the season, Louisville's offensive line still is going to be pretty inexperienced playing as a unit. And Wake Forest is going to have a really good defensive line because they return all 4 starters from a defensive line that only gave up on average 121.6 rushing yards per game last season, which ranked 28th in the country, and also had 30 sacks. So I think they're able to slow down Louisville's run game just enough to pull this upset. So now on the road at NC State. So while NC State doesn't have as much coming back as Louisville does, what they do have that Louisville doesn't is a third-year starter at quarterback in C.J. Bailey. And Bailey is one of the best quarterbacks in college football. He's going to play on Sundays after this season. He threw for over 3,100 yards last season, and while he's not as much of a dual threat quarterback as Louisville's Lincoln Clonals is, he's not a complete statue either. And while NC State doesn't have as good of a coach as Jeff Brohm, their coach, Dave Duran, is a solid coach. And I think this is going to be a very close back and forth kind of game, but I think home field advantage for NC State is just enough to get them this win. So now Florida State. So Florida State head coach Mike Norvell brings in his third transfer quarterback in 3 years. This time it's Ashton Daniels from Auburn, who I don't really like as much as I do the transfer that Jeff Brohm brought in, Lincoln Clonals. Now, Daniels is a dual threat quarterback like Clonals is, but I don't think he can throw as well as Clonals can. Now, Ashton Daniels will have some help at the skill positions because Florida State was able to get Deuce Robinson to come back for one more year, who's one of the best receivers in the country, who had over 1,000 yards receiving last season. And they were able to pick up a really good running back from Texas, Quintravian Wisner, who had over 1,000 yards rushing and 44 catches in 2024. But Jeff Brohm is a much better coach than Mike Norvell is, and while this game will probably end up being pretty close, I can't imagine on a Friday night at home, Louisville losing this game, because they've also got a much better defense than Florida State does as well. So now on the road at Syracuse. So Syracuse has a solid quarterback at Steve Angeli coming back from an injury, but I don't think he's any better than Louisville's Lincoln Clonals is. And I don't think Syracuse's defense can stop Louisville's run game. And Louisville has, I think, a way better defense than Syracuse has got. So I do think Louisville will win this game by a couple of scores, because not only all of that, they've also got a way better coaching staff. So now Stanford. So wide receiver is pretty similar with the two teams, but the transfer quarterback that Stanford brought in, Davis Warren from Michigan, was terrible when he was at Michigan. So I would trust Louisville's transfer quarterback, Lincoln Clonals, more than Davis Warren. So I'd say Louisville has the advantage in the passing game. Now, Stanford does have an experienced offensive line, which Louisville doesn't have. Stanford has 4 starters back there, except they do have to play better. And Stanford does not have the elite running back room that Louisville has got, and they also don't have as good of a defensive line as Louisville has got, because Louisville has Clev Lubin. Now, Stanford does have a very good group of linebackers, but their secondary is horrible. Louisville will have the advantage there too, and Louisville also has the coaching advantage. So, with all of that, and then home field advantage to Louisville, I have to go with Louisville to get this win by a couple of scores. So now on the road at Georgia Tech. So I think this is going to be a very close back and forth game. I think both teams are going to want to run the football for most of the game because these are possibly the two best running back rooms in all of college football. But I think the real difference is Louisville's defensive line having Clev Lubin. I think he's able to sack Georgia Tech's new quarterback Alberto Mendoza a couple of times and slow down Georgia Tech's run game a little bit to get Louisville this win. So now on the road at North Carolina. So even with this being the second of back-to-back road games, I still think Louisville, because of coaching, wins this game by double digits. Now with Bobby Petrino coming over as offensive coordinator at North Carolina, maybe Louisville's not better than them offensively, but defensively they're certainly a lot better than North Carolina is. North Carolina's almost completely redone their roster. So now Pittsburgh. So while I do think Jeff Brohm is a better coach than Pat Narduzzi at Pittsburgh, Narduzzi is a solid coach, and I am going with Pittsburgh to win this game because they have the more experienced quarterback in Mason Heinechel, and I think they're better on both sides of the line of scrimmage than Louisville is because they've got 4 out of 5 starters coming back on their offensive line. They should have one of the ACC's best offensive lines this season, and they returned 3 out of 4 starters on a defensive line that only gave up 95.1 rushing yards per game on average, which ranked 8th in the country. And Brohm always loses a game like this. That's what keeps him just a good coach and not a great coach, because you've seen that he can be a great coach because last year he went to Miami and upset them, but then he also got upset by Cal at home. So I do think, though, that this will be a very close back and forth game that goes down to the end. So now on the road at Kentucky in the rivalry game. So even though I like Will Stein because he's a first-year head coach, I do have to give Louisville the coaching advantage. And Will Stein did the same thing that Jeff Brohm did at Louisville. He brings in a 4-star, very inexperienced dual-threat quarterback like Canals is at Louisville, except he comes from Notre Dame. His name is Kenny Minke. So right now I'd have to say the quarterback position between these two teams is even. Now Minke will get some help with the skill positions like Canals will at Louisville. Stein brings in Nick Anderson, one of the best receivers in the portal from Oklahoma, and then also C.J. Baxter from Texas, a really good running back. And Stein also brought in Lance Hurd, who's one of the best offensive linemen in the country from Tennessee. Except besides him, like Louisville, Kentucky is questionable on their offensive line. Now, defensively, Stein was able to keep Ty Bryant, who's one of the best safeties in college football, but besides him, Kentucky's pretty questionable defensively, and Louisville, I would say, is a lot better. So I do have to go with Louisville to get this win by a couple of scores, probably. So my final prediction for Louisville in 2026 is 8-4 overall and 6-3 in the conference. So it won't get them into the ACC championship or the college football playoff, but still another good season for them. So that'll be it with this video. Please subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.